Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a story in which our OP and his brother conducted a whole operation to teach a jerk on the road and in a very original way, believe me. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Start driving crazy, you get a bad ending. My brother and I are driving limousines in Chicago, and one day we're leaving the airport and I'm driving behind my brother. A car tries to pass us on the gravel alongside the road. It sprays my beautiful Cadillac with rocks. But as it begins to pass my brother's car, and of course this guy has no idea that we know each other, there are limos everywhere, my brother swerves in front of the guy, and the bozo has to slam on the brakes and almost runs into the chain-link fence running alongside the road. This jerk begins laying on his horn and screaming out the window at my brother. He's still swearing up a storm as my brother slowly drives out onto the main street and pulls into the driveway of a hotel. The crazy driver jumps out of his car and runs up to my brother's window, but my brother slowly pulls away and keeps driving towards the back of the hotel, as this guy is kicking on the side of the limo and continues to yell now 50 to 60 yards away. I throw my car into park and run over to the guy's vehicle, reach in and grab his car keys, and launch them onto the roof of the hotel. I get back in my car, call my brother on the radio and say, "Hey, meet me at this restaurant a few blocks away. I got this taken care of." We had a very enjoyable lunch because, as everyone knows, laughter really can help one's digestion. An hour later, we drive by the hotel and the car's still sitting at the curb and the poor driver's just sitting next to his vehicle with his head in his hands. And our second story. My boss wanted me to clean the bathroom twice in a row, so I did. Background. This happened about a few months ago. I work as a porter at an AMF bowling alley. The coworkers are the type of people to haze you when you first start working and relentlessly task you with things that sometimes weren't in your job description. The alley opens at 11 on most days. We didn't normally get a lot of business, so half the time the building is empty, but today was a Thursday, so we had morning leagues which filled every lane. The first thing I do is take out the trash that no one decided to do the night before. When I came back inside, the boss tells me I need to clean the bathrooms. I walk in there, there's a minuscule amount of toilet paper scattered on each one, so I broom it into a pile and sweep it up into the dustpan. I grab the mop and start mopping the floor, starting with the bathroom used the most. Now in a bowling alley, it's very dangerous to have wet soles when bowling. You can slip very easily. One time a kid came in with his bowling shoes already on, coming out of a storm. He slipped onto the lane and slid halfway down. Thankfully, he was okay. In comes Boss. Boss was the type of lady who would send her steak back to the kitchen for being medium instead of medium well. And there's a few entitled parent stories I have of her. Anyway, she walks into the bathroom, just one by the way, none of the other three, and comes out saying it looked atrocious and that I needed to mop it because it's wet around the toilets. I stop and try to explain to her, with the mop being in my hand at the time, that the water around the toilets are just from the mopping I just did, and that the floor is indented at the basis of said toilets, causing it to cave inward and collect water. She gets absolutely livid, screaming at me that I would allow someone to pee on the floor and have the audacity to not clean it up. She came out of the ladies' room. At this point, half the league bowlers were here, watching as this Karen ripped me a new one, threatening me with my job and how I'll be banned from all AMF alleys on the East Coast. I gave in and eventually just mopped all the bathrooms again. So after about a half an hour of doing my other duties as a porter, about 15 lanes down, I hear a massive, collected, "Oh!" I ran to see what was going on, and a poor old lady who'd been bowling there for years was on the ground holding her now broken hip. I immediately help her to a chair while onlookers are calling for medical help. It turns out this poor lady had used the bathroom prior to her frame. I felt so bad and blamed myself for everything that happened. Until Boss came to see what was happening. She then decided to tear me open yet a new one, screaming things at me, calling me the worst worker she's ever seen. At this point, I'm blank-faced and done with it. I lean over to the old lady, writhing in pain in the chair next to me, and whisper to her, she forced me to clean and mop the bathroom twice, threatening my job if I didn't. The old lady said nothing. Once the ambulance came and left, I was fired due to incompetence. Court is next month, and I'm due to testify against boss with the nice old lady who I now occasionally play backgammon with in the home she stays at, which is convenient because my grandfather stayed there too. And our next story. Entitled uncle tries to sue for inheritance. My grandma recently passed away, and we went through the process of letting everyone know what had happened and what the plan was. My mom was the sole executor of the will, as she's the only actual next of kin, as my uncle is actually my mom's cousin who came to live with my grandma from Germany when he was 18 and moved out when he was 23. Now, the thing to understand about him and his wife and now adult kids is that they never ever visited my grandma. Every Christmas and Easter or any other holiday, we would always invite them, but they never came. In the 5 years before my grandma's death, they visited her once for about an hour. This, along with the other history of taking advantage of my grandma, my mother very much dislikes them, but is nice to them for my grandma's sake. They're also very wealthy, having 2 houses, a boat, and very nice cars. So when my grandma died and we organized for a funeral in both her home city and the one she died in, where we lived, we were very surprised to hear that we were coming down to both funerals. Looking back, the first thing they asked about was the will. But due to being so busy with organizing the funeral and grief, it didn't raise any red flags. Fast forward to after the second funeral. It's 9 a.m. the day after the funeral, literally about 10 hours, and my mom gets a phone call from the uncle. He again asks about the will, which my mom tells him that she's the sole executor and receives everything. Everything being a total of about 200,000 Australian dollars, which would probably just cover the cost of renovating our house so my grandma could move in with us when she was too unwell to live alone. And without missing a beat, he says, "Oh, we will have to take legal action then." My mom instantly hung up and blocked them on everything. She was incredibly distraught, still dealing with the death of her mother. We then got a letter from a lawyer requesting 50% of the inheritance due to bullcrap like helping renovate the family house, which was almost 30 years ago, and he lived in the renovation rent-free, and because he claimed to have an equal right to the money, as my mother did. This was really a slap in the face. Luckily, they had no legal standing, and we simply sent a letter that was a glorified F no. We then received an email from the aunt, which basically berated my mom for being selfish, that her kids would suffer and she would suffer, and how would my mom feel if the roles were reversed and all other bullcrap, saying that myself and my sister don't deserve the money, basically being a massive entitled B. She said that if we gave her $30,000, she would forgive and forget. Luckily, the block button works really well. It's still sad that they sacrificed our whole relationship with them over $30,000 and completely disrespecting my grandma. People with money just can't get enough, do they? And our last story. So I'm not the owner? I have an IT services business now, serving corporate clients. But several years ago, I also had a small chain of computer repair stores and took consumer walk-ins. I was a pretty active owner and would work the front counter regularly because I like to interact with customers, and when I can, I like to try to stay close to what the front line is struggling with, since they understand the business way better than me in some key regards. I also think pretty highly of myself, so I used to plaster my face on all my advertising, which resulted in my ending up as sort of a walking billboard for my business around town. So I'm working the counter at one of my shops, and this fellow I'd never seen before walks in and brings his computer to the counter and tells me that his computer's not working and that I need to fix it. He was a second language learner, and you can't always assume someone's trying to be rude if English is not their first language. Sometimes it just sounds that way. So patience is important, and so is not judging someone. I thank him for coming in and explained to him the diagnostic fees we charged, and that the diag fee went toward the repair, all the standard stuff, and he immediately flies into a rage. He tells me that he had already paid the fee and the computer still wasn't fixed. "Oh no," I said. "When did you bring it in?" He said he couldn't remember, but that it wasn't that long ago. So I looked it up in the computer system, and sure enough, there's his customer record, complete with the serial number of his system. It had been a full year since he'd had that computer in. When I explained this to him, and that it had been too long by anyone's standards, most new consumer computers only have a 1-year factory warranty, and this was not a new computer, he flies into another tirade about what a ripoff we are and how I need to fix this computer because it never worked right after he got it back. I explained it had just been too long, and that sets him off screaming and threatening me. Fortunately, there was a counter between us, so I tell him to get out of my store. I use profanity. It's not my finest hour, but profanity is a strong suit of mine. He won't leave, and says he isn't leaving until I fix his computer for free, and says he'll call the police if he has to. I pick up the phone and dial the police for him, explaining to the dispatcher I have someone in my shop who threatened me and refuses to leave. So the police show up, and by this time the guy has calmed down a bit and even seems thankful the police had arrived. After a short interview as to my job role in the situation, the responding officer says, "Sorry, the owner wants you to leave, so you're gonna have to leave." This sets the guy off even more, and he starts screaming, "He's not the owner! I know the owner! The owner would never treat me this way! He's not the owner!" So the policeman says, "This is the owner. I happen to know he's the owner." The guy continues to argue with the officer, but the officer remains calm. Okay, how about we talk about this outside? To my surprise, the guy grabs his computer and goes outside with the officer, still ranting on and on about how I had no authority and the officer had no right to throw him out, and he wants to speak to the owner. I could still see and hear the two of them outside the retail glass doors as the police officer calmly points to the 9-foot-tall retail windows on the front of the store, with my photo taking up 2/3 of the space, and my name and title in about 9-inch bold letters under my giant, ugly face. So the man goes silent, packs his computer in his car, hops in, and drives away. I never saw him again. I was really thankful one of my clerks didn't have to deal with that guy, but when I messaged them all the story, they all wished they'd been there. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.